Hey there everybody, it's Mike Delisio, and today I'm going to be reviewing Fateforge, Chronicles of Kaan, a dungeon crawl puzzly game with a big story element. Now, I want to tell you straight off the bat that I'm doing a extremely high level overview. I am not doing anything close to a how to play. There's a lot of story elements that I don't want to spoil, and you're spending a lot of time in combat, so I really focus mostly on what a combat round kind of looks like. So let's head over to the table, I'll show you that little bit, and then we'll come back here and I'll let you know what I think. To play Fateforge, you're going to have to download a free app, and this app is going to do a number of different things for you. It's going to show you how combat scenarios are laid out. It's going to do some type of bookkeeping and making sure that you are following the procedures and the steps for different elements of the game. Things along those lines. Now, again, I'm going to keep this very, very high level because there is a large story element to it and I don't want to spoil that. What you're seeing right now is going to be basically the first tutorial combat, and so you're not really getting much spoiled here. There are going to be times throughout the game where, when you're not necessarily in combat, you're going to be interacting with this map of Isafir, and there are a number of different locations and items on it that you can see that as through the game will progress, you will find out what those different locations are. Okay, there's a group of stickers that will basically tell you what each location is. You don't actually place them on the map. And at other times, you're going to be engaging in combat. And so really the big two elements of the game is progressing through the story, interacting with the map, maybe trying to find a particular route somewhere, and then engaging in combat to get to the next phase of the game. All right, and so right here I'm kind of showing you the tutorials here for this first combat, all right, because this is going to be the main element of the game. And so it talks about the objectives that you need to be able to complete any particular combat scenario. So for this tutorial, it's telling you that basically it's making it easier on you. You can reset the health and the focus of all of your heroes at the end of the combat. I'm not sure that's called focus, but it's called something I can't think of right now. All right. And so then you would go through and it's telling you, grab the tiles that are selected here. There's a whole bunch of tiles in the game, and you can zoom in on this, of course, to see the numbers of the tiles much more easily. Then it goes through the next steps of getting the correct enemies, which I have laid out here. Then it talks about putting any tokens like the entrance and the exit and the start. So I've got that token there and there. Then 4, putting the enemy tokens on the map as they show on here, and there's a whole bunch of enemies that you could potentially face in the game. They're on these tokens. Now I want to emphasize this is the deluxe version of the game. I can't speak to whether this is involved in the retail edition, if these are cardboard, if it doesn't have a box, I don't know. And also a little reference here on the top of the box that kind of keeps it easy for you to get those out, all right? And so you would be placing those out. I think we're here, and it tells you that you've got an enemy up here. You would put a couple of cubes on them. I'm not going to do that for the purposes of this. And we've already done that, sorry. And then additional tokens, like you would place a gem token right there, like I've already done. And then, I've already done that, sorry. And then you're creating a pool of cubes and tokens and things along those lines, which I'm not going to do for the purposes of this. Did that. And then a party bag. Okay, now here's where it's talking about player order and initiative, okay? And so in this scenario, this tutorial here, it's showing you that these are the two characters that are going to be in play, the mercenary and the forest guard here. So there's those two player boards. There are other characters that you can choose from as well, like the shaman, the nobleman, and the rogue. Each of them are going to have different dice that are going to be in their starting dice pool. They're going to have some specific skills depending upon their character. They may even have special tokens, like the nobleman here has a stance token that you would include along with his opening supplies of dice and things along those lines, all right? So what this is kind of telling you is that you're going to have, in any combat, you're going to have a an order that you'll set. First thing that's going to happen is you're going to roll the dice for your different characters so you can kind of see what they might plan to do on a turn, and then you can choose in what order they go. There will be an enemy reaction between the two players no matter what, and then there's going to be where every enemy takes a turn in the order that it shows here. So these cards are laid out in a specific order because they're going to go from top to bottom, and the associated pieces are shown here. And they tell you what they do depending upon where a particular target might be. So in the case of the guard dog, what this is saying is if one of the players is in its spot, so 0 range away, it's going to do an attack of 1. If somebody is 1 away, they're going to move an attack. 2 away, they'll move towards them. Things like that. So all of the different enemies are going to act differently depending upon what their cards will say. And then you put your minis on the starting tile and you're trying to complete the objective. All right, which in this case is you're trying to defeat this enemy so that you can exit out of that exit at the top. Okay, that's the general idea behind combat, is that your party members are going to roll their dice. You can never roll more than 4 dice. Okay, and so while I showed you on these player boards that these are their starting dice, throughout the course of the game you may get access to better dice, maybe that are associated with a particular item card or a weapon or things along those lines. No matter how many dice you get access to, you can only ever roll 4, okay? And so you have to kind of choose, depending upon what you might be trying to do that turn, to roll the dice that are best for your particular scenario, okay? So different dice do different things. You've got melee attacks, you've got movement dice, you've got ranged attacks. These are focus die that kind of will mean different things depending upon which player is playing them. Things along those lines. And also, like I said, some characters may have special tokens. As you go throughout the game, you're going to get new and better equipment. You start with a couple of pieces of equipment in the game, but obviously as you progress, it's going to get more and more advanced, as are the enemies that you're going to face as you progress throughout the campaign. All right, the general idea is all laid out on this card, and combat is the biggest part of the game. So that's really all that I wanted to focus on here. The app, like I said, will handle kind of all the setup and tell you what to get out, where to place everything, and it will also kind of help you keep track of the initiative order, although there are also tiles that you will lay out to visually see, okay? And again, a number of dice in the game, a whole bunch of different enemies, and you're getting just the very basics because I really don't want to spoil too much. All right, that's the general overview of Fateforge. Let's head back and I'll let you know what I think. All right, again, so just to reinforce, you're seeing the very, very tip of the iceberg there. I chose to really just show you basics of combat because most of the mechanical elements of the game are related to that, although there's a lot more going on. There's a large amount of story elements where you are going to be making choices based upon different things that will come up in the story, branching storylines, things along those lines. As I mentioned briefly in the overview, you have this big map that you're going to be oftentimes interacting with, trying to find locations, perhaps based off of clues that you may have gained through earlier interactions that you had. And so it's a game that is pretty wide in scope. Now, let's just first talk a little bit about the components. And as I've mentioned, this was a deluxe edition that you saw in the overview, and it is the only version of the game I've had access to. I have neither seen nor played the retail edition of the game. So I can only speak to this edition, and it is lovely. It's very, very nicely done. There's really good quality wooden and cardboard components in the game. The map tiles are nice and thick. They're easy to distinguish, which is very important to me. I have mentioned in the past that I kind of like the direction that many dungeon crawlers are going with books, because oftentimes I find that the tiles can be unwieldy, hard to differentiate, things along those lines. It is not as much of a problem in this game for a couple of reasons. Number one, as I mentioned, it's very easy to delineate which tile is which. The letter and number signifiers on them are very, very large. So even with man of advanced age eyes, I'm able to get the right tiles very quickly. Also, this is more of an overall appreciation I have in this game, which is that there's an economy of components for the depth of the game. What I mean by that is they're able to accomplish a lot without hundreds of tiles, dozens and dozens and dozens of dice. They're able to get a lot out of a relatively small dice pool, a relatively small tile pool, not hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of tokens, right? That's very impressive to me, that you can have a game with this scope and you don't have a gigantic box filled with hundreds of components and chits and pieces that you have to kind of fuddle through to get going. It's a game that, for the type of game it is very easy to set up, very easy to save. They have a great save system where essentially every character is going to have their own box, and within it is a baggie, and you place the things that are available to you when you restart in the baggie, and everything else goes outside. So if you've lost some health, things along those lines, they're outside of that baggie, and you know to place them in the exhausted portion. Just a small box is all you need to really keep your character moving throughout the campaign. So I appreciate that. The quality of the components is good. The economy of the components is very good as well. Now, moving past that to let's talk about the story next. I found myself invested in the story. It's a fantasy story. Obviously, this is a fantasy setting, but I find it's more grounded than a lot that I've interacted with, and I tend to, I think, relate to that a bit more. So certainly there are fantastical elements. I mean, there's winged creatures on the box cover, for example, but it still has a healthy dose of reality, where what you're trying to do, the kind of dilemmas that you face, are well enough grounded in reality that I found myself compelled and invested in the story. It was easy to follow. Even after taking a little bit of time away between a session, I found myself able to get myself right back into the swing of the story and keep going and trying to fulfill those different elements that it's going to present you throughout the game. So I found the story to be interesting, easy to follow, fantastical, but grounded enough to still keep my interest. Combat, that's kind of what you saw the most of in the overview, so I want to spend a bit of time talking about that, because I feel like this game would, more than anything else, live or die on the combat system, right? And thankfully for me, this is a fantastic combat system. So there's a continuum when you talk about dungeon crawl games, right? You have dungeon crawl games, and I'm not even naming all of the parts of the continuum, but you have dungeon crawl games that are essentially get a handful of dice chucking games, move into a space with a bunch of baddies, roll dice, activate cards, combos, and you're just hitting things, right? You're punching things, you're maybe shooting them with a missile, magic missile, whatever the case may be. Those can be fun when done very well, but that's one end of the continuum. On the other end of the continuum, you have puzzly dungeon crawl games, and I can think of Gloomhaven as an example of that right now. That doesn't even have dice. It's more of a puzzly type of a game where you are trying to figure out how you're going to complete different objectives and scenarios. And Fateforge is on that end of the continuum. It is a game that is much more puzzly than you might find in other dungeon crawl games. And those are the ones that tend to appeal to me for my play style. Your mileage may vary, of course, depending upon where you are on that continuum. And I like both sides of it when it's done well, right? And I think that the puzzly element is done very, very well here. Because you have a limited pool of dice. You've got cards that you're going to be gathering throughout the game, items, skills, and that's where really the heart of the game is being able to get skills that you can use to trigger other things that you want to do in the game. And so every turn is its own puzzle, right? For each of the players. If you're playing solo, you kind of are puzzling over each of the two characters you're in. In a multiplayer co-op game, each player is kind of trying to figure out what they're going to do. And you have to figure out how best to do it, both through the roll of the dice, which is going to have some element of luck. There is some small mitigation involved in the game, but mostly through the different skills that you have. Each character, as I mentioned, is going to have a particular pool of dice that lends itself to the skills and the items that they start with and may get throughout the game. And so I really like that each turn is its own little puzzle. You also have limited information on what the enemies are going to do, which is great. I mean, that's how it should be, right? You should know exactly which enemies are going to be reacting when. And so that monster or enemy reaction system, I think, is really, really clever because it doesn't involve all of the enemies. It's going to pick two of the enemies that are out there, and they're going to react in some way. And then at the end, after every player has taken their turn, then all the enemies are going to react, and you have an idea there. So you do know essentially what they're going to do at the end of their turn. All right, so there's a bit of limited information, and then you know kind of what's going to happen at the end. And so that leads to some really good decision making, some crunchy decisions. This is not a dice chucker, although there are dice involved. It is much more of a contemplative, how can I best achieve these objectives? And that's why the objective system works so well in this game, because you'll have oftentimes multiple objectives that you're trying to complete, but then there are going to be other shiny things out there that you may want to go for because maybe you're going to get some treasure, maybe you're going to get some better items, things that you can use during a rest period to beef up your character. And so you've got kind of these things that cross purposes, and you also have a timer built in, right? You've got to get it done in the particular number of rounds that you have at the beginning of the combat. And so I think the combat system is terrific. The story is very, very good. The components are great. All of that adds up to an outstanding experience in my mind, and that's why I'm giving Fateforge an 8.5 out of 10, a seal of excellence. This one has a whole lot to offer, and if you like dungeon crawls, but you don't necessarily love the dice chucking ones, this could be one to check out. If you like the dice chucking ones, but you like a good story, this could get you with the story. And so I think it has pretty wide appeal across not just people that play dungeon crawls, but also people that may just like cooperative games, for example, this being a cooperative dungeon crawler. So there you go, 8.5 for Fateforge. My name is Mike DeLisio, and I will see you on the next one.
Hey everybody, thanks for watching this video. If you like this review or whatever you just watched, wasn't it amazing? Check out our channel, Dice Tower. We have all kinds of things. We review games, we do top 10s, we play games live. It's all about board games, but especially the people who play them. Check out Dice Tower YouTube channel.